Hello,
Welcome back to another podcast. This week we have drum roll,
Belinda.
please.
Oh, sorry, that's smooth. Belinda Jiao.
Belinda Jiao. Yeah, really, really honoured to speak to her. She is a fantastic photographer. Um, she works quickly. She's a what? How would you class her photography?
Well, she works for like news outlets, so she covers like politics, events happening. Like she's mainly based in London, I
In
think.
London, yeah.
So, I'll put a link up to her Instagram, but if you see a lot of the stuff on there, she has a photo syndicated across like newspapers and, you know, um, television and, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
She has her work in papers on, online papers, magazines, that kind of thing. But
well,
yeah, it
she's
was fun.
like, we went to Brighton in the summer
Yeah.
and I've still got photos from Brighton that I haven't looked at and haven't even developed.
Yeah.
So imagine the opposite of that. That's
Mm.
what she is.
Oh yeah, she'll get like a text or a call at 10 to 8 in the morning to say, right, you've got to be there at 8 o'clock taking photos, and we want the photos by 10 o'clock. So yeah, she works quick, but
Mm.
she's also a really good photographer. Like
Well,
I,
yeah, I
I
mean,
yeah, I couldn't work that fast and have good results at the end of it. No way. I struggled to get good results with unlimited time. But yeah, it was a pleasure speaking to her. We won't talk for too long on this intro because we want it to be about Belinda and the questions that we've had for her. Um, but yeah, go check her out. Go check her work out. Follow on Instagram. Help support. Drop her a message. She's lovely. Enjoy the episode. Drum roll, please. Been a while since I've done that. Cool. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it. If you want to start off by just kind of briefly introducing yourself and telling us how you got into photography, maybe.
Right. Hello, everyone. This is Belinda, and I am currently based in London. So I'm currently in the process of getting into news photography, mostly doing newspaper stuff like protests, a lot of protests, and also do politicians and generic stuff that you see that will come up in newspapers. And I'm originally from Hong Kong, so I grew up there. I was born there, grew up there. I studied there until uni, and then I moved to London. So I think it's like a mixture of being a foreigner here and also like just being young and having lots of things to explore that really got me into the realm of news photography because it does send you around London quite a fair bit, and it's a fun city to be in. And as to how I got into photography, that would have to we'll have to go back a few years since like when I was in my teens, I guess. That was when the smartphones first came out. So I was one of the early adapters of Instagram. I'm probably not the earliest people to use Instagram, but I would say that most of my photography education actually came from Instagram, which could be a good thing and could be a not so good thing. But basically, I think one of the credits that I'll have to give to Instagram is the fact that it was really captivating as a platform in its earliest stages. You could really connect with people who are very enthusiastic, and you could really connect with people in your locality. And so you see what they're doing, you try to mimic them. It's also a very friendly community, and that's how I really got into like learning more about photography on a more technical sense. But eventually, I feel like I started drawing inspiration from other sources. So, like reading photo books and doing stuff that's not exactly very Instagrammable,
Yeah.
and wandering off and exploring my own stuff. And that's how I kind of developed my own style as a photographer, and also eventually started doing film photography.
Yeah.
So these kind of things, they all came in stages, but I got started in photography mostly because of the Instagram hype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool though, because I think back to when Instagram first came out, or when I started to go on it, definitely in its earlier days. And again, it was a lot kind of simpler back then. And I'm not saying it's bad now. And I know there's this kind of big hoo-ha at the minute is like,
Mhm.
is Instagram good? Is it bad? Or, it's changed so much to how it was, and we all want it back to how it was. But I don't think I've ever spoke to someone who kind of got into photography from the start of Instagram before. Do you know what I mean? Like, I remember when Instagram came out and it was just, oh, okay, this is a place to connect with my friends, or meet new people, whatever it might be, but not so much from an artist point, if that makes sense. Not like an art form like photography or videography, whatever it might be. It was more just a place to share your photos from the weekend, so to speak. So it's cool to say, that's really cool that you've kind of, been, like you said, from the earlier days, and you've kind of progressed throughout, the last however many years Instagram's been around. But you can see that you've kind of grown as an artist, which is really cool, that you've got like, you've got knowledge from Instagram, which is good to hear.
Right. As in, I probably wouldn't say that Instagram was it wouldn't be the source from which I directly get knowledge from in terms of how to take a good photo. But I think the engagement aspect and the social aspect really was a driving force as to why I would like to produce the next post.
Yeah.
And I would see people leave thoughtful comments, and they would engage. And that was, as shallow it might sound, that to me was one of the reasons why I wanted to take, photos on a consistent basis,
Yeah.
and making it a regular thing. And that inadvertently, I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but that kind of introduced me to what photography could look like. And I just eventually got into the habit of going out, taking photos, and trying to make them better. Although it's by no means a professional, source of education, still, it kind of got the momentum going. And
you got the bug, so to speak. You got addicted to it from there.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's great. And so how many years have you been in the UK now?
Right. So on and off, I have left the UK, but it spans across 5 years. So
yeah,
I think since I first landed in the UK, it's now been 5 years.
Yeah. And so every time, I'm assuming that you go back to Hong Kong from time to time to see family and friends and whoever it might be. But do you always go back and want to take photos there as well, or is it a time to kind of put your camera down?
Right. I do think that the two cities are very different. And so there really is a good reason as to why I would like to pick up a camera even in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
The architecture is different. The city is different. And most importantly, that's where I started photography. And so it just looks very familiar to me. And I feel like every time I go back, there is something new that I have not previously been aware of. And every time I go back, I see things slightly differently because of the experience I've gained here in London.
Yeah. And I suppose you're always kind of learning new things, and I certainly know that you try a lot, because not try to be a good photographer, you are a good photographer, but I see that you try cameras and new films and new ways of taking photos, which is really good. Like me and Luke have always enjoyed connecting with people that try so many new things all the time, especially in your videos, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, I liked the one where you were trying out the disposable camera, like the lomography. What's it called? It's not like disposable, like reusable camera.
Yeah.
I liked that you said in the video, like, it's disposable, but like, really every camera is disposable if you really
right.
throw your DSLR away. But it's really funny because that's something I've thought before, that like disposable is such a rubbish way of describing a camera, because like everything is disposable really, if you really wanted to throw something in the bin. It does wind me up when things aren't named like properly like that. But there was something in that video where you mentioned about using that type of camera and how it allowed you to be a bit more like discreet, I think, with taking photos, because it's less makes less of an impact in front of people. But is that something that you find yourself a lot? Because I definitely do. Like, I'll see a photo and I'll be like, I think that looks cool, but to somebody observing, they would think, why are you taking a photo of whatever it is, because they don't see the
Yeah.
photographic aspect of it. But is that something that you find a lot when you're out taking photos?
Yes, a fair amount actually. Both when I'm working and both when I'm taking photos for my own enjoyment. And I think people's perception of you, you can't really blame them, to be honest, because they're not photographers and they don't know how it works. But people's perception of your intentions and where those photos are gonna go really depends on what you have in your hand. So let's say if you have a proper DSLR with a really long lens, which is the case for me when I do press work, people tend to be really, sensitive as to why you're gonna take the picture and who is it for, and they try to get you into, the nitty-gritty of the details of where those photos are gonna go.
Yeah.
Whereas I've had experiences where people were actually really excited when I take out my TLR. So it's this really old, vintage-looking camera that has two lenses in the front, and it's basically obsolete. No one really uses them in the professional sense anymore. But when I shoot with that camera, people tend to warm to me really well, and they would actually actively ask to have their photo taken and ask if I could send it back to them. And that would be a really nice portrait opportunity because, the people who tend to be happy to make a conversation tends to be the people who are really interesting. They might, they're generally more open-minded and they would make really good portraits usually. Whereas if you go out with like a relatively smaller DSLR with a prime lens, for instance, you don't look as intimidating, but then you still get some strange stares and people still, feel that you might be like a threat. So it really depends on how you manage people's expectations as to why you're photographing and how you carry yourself. So in relation to the disposable camera, I don't actually shoot like serious work on it, but I do shoot a lot of like family moments and friends. When I have friends over, I would shoot on that camera because it just puts people at ease. Like it for generations that came before us, it reminds them of their childhood, for instance. It reminds them of them being a kid and having that in their hands, and it just brings up a lot of nostalgia. And so I feel like it's a good way of photographing people who you kind of know, but then would be not exactly comfortable with shooting on a proper DSLR.
Yeah. It's quite funny when you say that because I have like a point and shoot camera that I use for family life, right? It's something that I kind of carry with me and I shoot from time to time, but I wouldn't say that I would go, I'm not a professional photographer, but I wouldn't use it for work that interests me in terms of my photography kind of career, if you like.
Yeah, I get it.
But in terms of what you're saying, going back to what you're saying about people getting a little bit funny sometimes, I think that if you have a digital camera, not all the time, but if you have a digital camera, people tend to be a little bit funnier because they're like, oh, why are you taking photos of me? Or why are you taking these photos? Or why are you here? Me and Luke actually had it a couple of weeks ago. We put out a video of us going around this kind of abandoned, what would you call it?
Yeah, like a waste ground.
Like a wasteland. And when we got back to the car after we'd been walking around for a few hours, there was a woman there that got a little bit funny with us. But at the same time, there's been situations where I've taken photos of people on a analog camera and people just like the nostalgia that you've got for using an analog camera because they know it's old, right? They know, or it's certainly going to be older. And those people are like, seem to be more interested and they not necessarily don't mind you taking a photo, but they're definitely more intrigued, which is weird because you can't actually show them the photos. Do you know what I mean? If someone's like, oh, why are you taking a photo of me? Let me see that. You can be like, well, no, I can't.
It's film, I can't,
But then they're like, oh, that's pretty cool that you're using that. I remember my granddad used to have one of those cameras. Or, do you know what I mean? It's a lot, it tends to be a softer blow to people. And, they appreciate that you're actually doing something that's not everyone does, right? Because everyone has a phone in their hand. Everyone's got a digital camera nowadays. But so it's a love-hate relationship sometimes, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Maybe it's like maybe it's because you've put more thought into like owning a camera if you're shooting on film, and it's like it's more of a hobby, I guess, than a like, I don't know. It is a weird thing. I like you're Jamie, like you're quite good at asking people for photos, aren't you? Which I'm no good at it. And like there's a couple of times that I have done it and people have just they've said no, and I'm like, that's the worst. That's my worst fear. Like you know that you're just going to be like, no, not at all. And I had somebody come up to me and be like, wow, that's such a cool camera. And I was like, oh, can I take your portrait? And he was like, no. And just like, was like, oh right, okay, well that's strange. But do you get that? Do you ever ask people for like photos in the street or anything, Belinda, or are you is that not really your sort of thing to do?
Yes, I do. So I tend to not put that on video because it's a bit hard to manage, like, you know, directing them and also filming a video of myself and them. Because I think the video does create some suspicion as well. Like people would be like, whoa, wait, you're now taking my photo, but then also I'm on video. And obviously people don't necessarily want to be on YouTube. So I don't put that much of portrait work on my YouTube. But yes, I do that. I think it's like a mixed bag, really. So sometimes I just directly point the camera at the person until they see me, and they'll be like, oh, and I'll be like, oh, you have a, say, really nice hat, or I really like your outfit. And I just give them a reason why I want to photograph them.
Yeah.
That's one way of going about it. Another way would be just really upfront, like going up to them and ask, oh, can I have a photo of you? And it's really up to them, but I think I'm pretty cool with them saying no, because of the nature of the work that I do professionally. I do get no's a lot. And so I fully appreciate that they really don't want to be on camera. And sometimes you just have to admit, like, you just have to accept the fact that some people are, you know, not so fun. Like they aren't that appreciative of, you know, casual fun. So
that's a good
I'll just move on. Yeah.
You can't beat yourself up, right? There's always another photo that is available to take, right? And there's you know, and I think people need to remember that. Don't beat yourself up too much. You know, people get more embarrassed than others. Luke said that I'm good at it, but I still get the nerves of going up to someone and asking, even if I do ask. But I was saying just before we jumped on this that I quite like the challenge of taking a photo without asking. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But it depends on the kind of photography. But this is a nice little segue into your kind of like YouTube channel, if you like, because I did want to touch upon that. I really enjoy your videos, and as you know, me and Luke haven't been doing it that long, but we can take a lot of inspiration from channels like yours and, you know, other people that we follow. But we appreciate it so much more when it's just you, right? Because like you said, you have to go out and film, then you have to go out and take the photos. If you're shooting film, then you have to develop them, wait for them to come back whilst you're editing the video. Have you kind of got like a bit of a routine now of like how you'll approach something? Or could, respectfully, some of your videos are very different, right? Sometimes you'll be talking to the camera and you'll be doing somewhat of a review, whether it be a film stock or a photo book. But sometimes I just enjoy seeing wherever you are and seeing the, you know, the photos that you've made. So are you constantly kind of coming up with new ideas, or are you just kind of, I'll always have my camera with me, I'll always film just in case I can make a video?
Right. I think my channel is kind of like a bit all over the place. And I think that's actually a healthy thing, because with photography over time, well, when I just started the channel, I tried really hard to create a routine for this so that I know it's repeatable and that I know what I'm doing every single day. So for instance, I would set myself deadlines by what day of the week I will have all the photos ready, and then I will start editing on, say, a Wednesday, and do the thumbnails on Thursday and upload it on Friday and have it scheduled for Saturday, for instance. But then I realized that that's not exactly serving myself creatively, because you just can't portion things out like that with photography and in general anything that's creative. On some days, especially we're in London, and on some days the weather's just not up for it. You just can't shoot film when it's raining. I mean, you can, okay, but unless you're after that look, if the light's not good, you'll just have to accept the fact that you're not going to get the light vibe, like the light
welcome to
that
the
you want. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I kind of learned how to live with the fact that you just can't have everything so pre-planned.
yeah.
And that's why I try to switch things up so that I know if something doesn't go to plan, I mean, I would always have some sort of idea of what I'm going to do in a few weeks time, but just in case something doesn't go to plan, I will still be able to do a different video because I know I could pull it off. And one of those kind of videos that I really enjoy doing is the artist video. So like talking about some of the famous photographers that I really like and that I think the audience would also enjoy. That kind of thing, it has more to do with general knowledge, and it's less dependent on my work schedule, the weather, and like my film chemicals not arriving, stuff like that. So I do
recently, didn't you, as well, doing that? And I can't remember who it was now. I can't remember the artist.
The most recent one
was Dean Arbus. The
That's
most
it,
recent one was Dean Arbus. Yeah,
and I really enjoyed that, and I also really respected you because at the start of the video you were like, this isn't like a an hour-long documentary. I'm not going to tell you all the facts or anything. It was a more personal opinion from your side of things, but at the same time it was still educational, and especially if you'd not heard of that artist, right, it was still nice to know like the key points and your thought process on how that book was put together or that artist's work. And yeah, I really like those videos. For me, I'd rather watch a video that's 10-15 minutes long that makes me want to go and find out more than commit an hour of my time and after 10 minutes I'm a little bit bored, if you know what I mean.
Right. I'm glad you said that, because when I was planning for the video, I tried really hard to balance between laying out the facts of who Diane is, and I mean who Diane was and what she did, versus how I see things. So how I see her, because it could be a delicate balance, as in there's obviously people in the audience who haven't heard of Diane before. And there will be people who already know a fair bit about her. And there will be people who want to hear more on how I see her. So it's a delicate balance to achieve. And especially when I was aiming to like contain it within 5 minutes, which I epically failed, it was a fun video to create because it forces you to really think of what's the most iconic things about her that you think the audience should know. And how do you put that across without being overly simplistic and also not trying to bore everyone?
But I think you do that very well, because at the same time as well, I can go and research that photographer, right, and I can find out every aspect of his or her life from other videos or news articles or documentaries, whatever it might be, but I've never heard your opinion on that person.
That's it.
Do you know what I mean? So, and that's always interesting. Or whether it be a person or a camera or a film stock, whatever it might be, if someone wants to know the technical details about a certain camera, a certain photographer, it's already been done. But if you do it in your own way, then I've never seen that, right? I've never heard your opinion and why you like them or don't like them, which again, that always keeps me coming back to your channel and other channels, right? Because it's nice to see a personal opinion on it and how you relate your own life or work to that, right? So I think that's important for everyone to do or take on board. It's like it's really reassuring to hear as well about you know kind of not beating yourself up about a schedule, because me and Luke, it's
you would know.
We say to ourselves, right, we need to have this video ready by 2 weeks before it's going to go out. We need to start filming for the next video. We're going to edit on these days. But then life happens, right? And something comes up and it changes the whole schedule in a few minutes. So really, we shouldn't beat ourselves up so much. You know what I mean?
I think for 6 months we put out a video every Wednesday, every single week, and then after that we were like, it's hard to keep it up, like to keep that flow of stuff going. And I
enjoy doing it. You don't want to have to feel like, oh, I'm putting out a video because I need to put one out. It's not very good. When really you should just put out something when you're ready to put it out. Make sure you're happy with it.
And I'd just leave everything till the last minute, and I'll be like editing like the night before or whatever, and then I always do it. I get to the end and go, I haven't written a description, I haven't done the thumbnails, and I'm like, have to do them really quickly. And it's like, you don't want it to be
so relatable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always forget about thumbnails. I don't know. I feel like, because like I'm someone who's quite into my YouTube, right? I watch YouTube most evenings. I'll probably watch YouTube. Like, I don't really watch TV. Like, me and my fiance, we don't really watch TV. We'll either watch The Office on Netflix or we'll watch YouTube. It will just be random.
That's a good one to watch.
Yeah, it is a good one to watch. But then we'll watch YouTube. You know, there's channels that we both follow that we enjoy watching the videos together, or we'll randomly put something on, right? So for me and how I use YouTube, I feel like I'm always interested in what people that I've already supporting are doing next. And it's nice to see people trying new things or changing and not sticking to the same thing necessarily. I think that's important. People that kind of stagnate, not only are they getting bored making those videos, but so is the audience watching it, right? And it's the same, you know, you can kind of relate that to photography. You should always be trying new techniques out. Even if you don't like them, at least you can tick them off and say you've tried them.
Very true.
Yeah. I was enjoying it, like the other day, just clicking on random, you know, when you get suggested videos and you like barely ever watch them. I was just watching random people's ones, and like I found some good people. I found some ones that looked interesting and actually weren't very interesting. But like the worry is, I think you're like, if I click on that video, I'm just, even if I don't subscribe to their channel, I'm going to just get suggested them forever, and you kind of, you don't want to like make the algorithm think that you want to watch more of their videos. But yeah, it was like, that's quite an enjoyable thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah. So when did you decide to kind of start like a YouTube channel, and you know, have you got any kind of like future plans for the channel or videos?
Right. The original intention of the YouTube channel was actually not to be a YouTuber, like as in, as a photographer, I think you would understand. You enjoy being behind the camera way more than being in front of the camera. If you wanted to be in front of the camera, you probably wouldn't have been a photographer. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I had a blog that I write about photography. I do enjoy writing a lot. So I thought maybe as part of my marketing, you know, strategy, I would have videos as well. I would have video content on my blog. So that would make my blog rank better in Google. So that was where it all started. That was the original intention. It was like more like a supportive function of my blog rather than a thing in itself. But then I realized that actually there are many things to be learned in the process of making videos. It's basically like another dimension of storytelling that you don't get by just putting out photographs or putting out words. Rather, you'll have to be good on camera. You'll have to think of how to lay out, you know, the sequence of how you tell a story. You'll have to take care of the visuals, tiny things like what you put at the back of your wall. You know, tiny things like these would all contribute towards the story that you eventually tell. And that was really interesting to me. I've never really been a video person, and also like the audio, you know, how to make it sound good and how to make people actually comfortable listening to the output on your mic. So tiny things like these made me realize that there's this whole new world of creating content and just trying to tell stories, basically.
Yeah. And
that was what kept me going. So I just wanted to learn and improve upon every video that comes out. Yeah. Plus, better that I could talk about something that I really care about. And that's how the channel eventually grew to where it is today. Moving forward, to be honest, I am not sure where it's gonna go. I will just still continue showing up and putting up content that I think would be interesting to viewers, and also things that I would like to learn about. To be honest, in the process of putting together these videos, I myself have learned a lot. Yeah. Like, you know, there are many things that I have a brief idea of, but because you're putting out a video that's publicly available to, you know, everyone in the world, you have this added responsibility to make sure that the stuff you say is accurate. You don't want to, you know, say something that's misleading and eventually have someone make wrong decisions because of what you've said. So this weight that comes with the power of being able to speak freely was one of the reasons why I, you know, I put in a lot of effort to research every single thing I say and to make sure that I'm presenting a view that is prudent to what I really want to say. And in that process,
I had a question about this, to be honest.
Right? Yeah.
Again, it might just be because, you know, people probably don't notice this kind of thing, or, you know, most people wouldn't notice it. But if you've made videos before, edited videos before, or ever had to speak to a camera before, you'll know how hard it is. But when you talk to the camera, you are looking at the camera. So do you memorize all your facts, or do you have a little piece of paper and cut out the times that you look at it? Because I swear that you never look at any references around. Where me, sometimes I have to have like a piece of paper just out, you know, out of shot. But I swear every time you're talking and like you know, you reel off some facts sometimes. I'm like, how does she remember that? You know what I mean? Like, but it's also nice to see that you know, you don't claim you know, you don't proclaim yourself to be like an expert that can't learn anymore. You can see that your photographic journey is still continuing. You're also very knowledgeable with what you already know, but you'd still admit to yourself and to your audience, right, that you're still learning as you go on, right? Which is a good thing.
In terms of what I do when I film the you know, the footage, I don't keep pieces of notes around, because I know if I have notes, I will not resist the temptation to actually look at the notes. So and I think when I watch videos, I tend to be quite aware of the fact that the speaker isn't looking directly into the camera. So I know that I'm really conscious of not making that mistake myself. And so I try to do everything to avoid looking unnatural on camera. And so I decided that maybe it's better to do a few runs, even if I'll have to say the same thing over and over again, than have a piece of paper that I will be tempted to look at, because then even if I complete the video in one sitting, right, I'm still like, if I end up looking away from the camera, I'll have to redo the whole thing. So I usually just have a few points that I put down on my phone, and then I make sure that I kind of know what I'm going to say, because you grow nervous if you don't actually know what you want to say. But if you kind of have an idea of where you're going to go with the video, I think with a few runs, you would reasonably be able to say it fluently. And of course, the editing is really important as well. I just cut out everything that, you know, I don't want to have in the video. So that is probably why I appear as if I look into the camera, though I do rely heavily on editing, and also I do say things a lot of times before it actually goes out.
That's good to hear, because I say things thousands of times.
Yeah,
sometimes
I relate.
Luke will send me a message saying, or, you know, I'll send him a message, oh, we need to do an intro, or can we do this, that and the other. I'll sit here for an hour and it's a 30-second clip. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'll be like, oh God. And then I'll go through this weird stage of trying to memorize something, even though I haven't actually said it yet. Because, you know, you're trying to take all the pros of all the previous trials and try and put it into one package. But I'm kind of learning to not put too much pressure on myself. At the end of the day, I'm not making like a Hollywood movie. I'm just trying to reel off a few things that I need to say. Do you know what I mean? But same as you, we cut out all the little bits that do you know what I mean? And it does make it look a little bit more fluent. But it is hard. It's a massive, you know, I could be the most confident person in the world, but as soon as I put that camera on me, like you said, we prefer to be behind the camera, not in front of it.
Yeah, I think it's quite natural, isn't it, for people to just sort of suddenly you go, oh, it's called, like, is it red light fever? As soon as you hit record, your mind just goes blank.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I knew what I was going to say. I know. Let me stop this clip because I'll do it, and, you know, I don't want it to be wasted. Yeah. And then you're like, right, know what to do. Hit record.
And then it happens again, all over again.
The amount of I could make an hour-long film of me going.
Yeah,
All the bloopers,
Like, you know,
yeah, they would add up.
yeah.
But yeah,
it's comforting to hear that it can be a struggle, you know.
Yeah. My main problem is I'll be halfway through saying something and my mind will just go, and I'm like, I'm still talking, but I'm thinking, what were you trying to say? What's the point? And I do it when we're doing these. I'll be like asking someone a question and then like talk about something else for a little while and then come back to the question. And I'm like, I can't remember what I just said. And like, I hope I asked the question somewhere in there. Yeah, that's not fun at all.
I want to talk a little bit to you about before we move on, if you are listening to this, there will be a link down below to Belinda's YouTube channel, as well as your Instagram and everything else. So please go and check that out. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about what I want to call a newer venture for you, which is the kind of photojournalism side, the news side of everything. I know you've been doing it for some time now, but how did you kind of get into that in the first place?
Right. To be very honest, I didn't really intentionally get into this. I kind of stumbled into it. And the reason was because I was shooting quite a lot of street stuff, not in the sense of protest, but rather, abstract street photography that basically doesn't have to do with people, and that could take place anytime as long as I want to, as long as I want to go for it. And eventually I just start seeing people demonstrating, because it's London, and almost every other weekend you would have some sort of activist group around in central London, and they'll be doing something. They're usually really loud also, so it's really hard to not notice them, to be honest. Like if you shoot enough on streets, for sure you will run into some people who are demonstrating, or they're doing some sort of protest in some form, or marching around. And so gradually I just thought that, okay, this looks interesting to me, because where I'm from Hong Kong, I don't get to see this kind of activity that much. I mean, we do have demos and we do have large ones, and when they happen, they aren't nice, but it's this sporadic activity that's kind of like an ongoing thing, which is an integral part of the city life that really intrigued me, and so I wanted to explore it further. And I also see that whenever there are these events, there tend to be quite a lot of photographers and videographers in those events trying to document the whole process. And so I just kind of realized that there's this whole other realm of photography, either you, how do you say, like you either call it photojournalism or documentary, that I was not previously aware of. And funnily enough, I also realized that I've actually signed up to one of those news photography agencies that would take these kind of photos. And so I just started experimenting with the whole process of going to protests, taking photos, and then sending them to the press. And I really did not expect to get any publications, but I did. And so eventually it just gave me a more solid reason as to why I'm going. I'm not just going there for myself to have fun, but rather it does come out in say online or even in the papers. And that was how I realized, okay, so this is an entirely separate industry, otherwise known as press photography, that is worth exploring. And so it just eventually started meeting more people, going to more things, because as a freelancer, you just find out about what's happening and then just go. So you basically know a bit more about the city, you know about London better, and you start knowing about when things are happening and just go. And eventually it became my main thing.
Yeah. That's really cool, because you've actually answered one of my questions. I was going to ask you a question about how did you go from going to these kind of marches or whatever it might be to actually getting your work published, right? And you've registered to like a press agency, which is awesome, and it's so good. I mean, you must feel a sense of achievement to see that your work has been printed or published you know, whether it be online or in the paper. And I guess, you know, it goes back to, you know, like when you first found photography, right? You were excited, it was this new thing. Do you feel like that this type of photography is, you know, you've become somewhat addicted to that as well, right? Like it's a new challenge.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why it's so alluring to me is because with news photography, the quality of the photos become secondary. So previously, all I care about was how to make a frame look visually appealing.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? Like that's the reason why you are shooting, because you want to get a frame that looks aesthetically pleasing to yourself. And that was basically how I was operating. That was my rationale behind photo taking for years, until I came into this realm of news photography slash photojournalism. And that was when I realized that maybe there is some more to photos, as in they play this critical role of informing people of what's happening. And so given that as the primary goal of why you're taking pictures, you kind of see pictures differently.
Yeah.
So you kind of learn how to, I mean, obviously the quality is important, but then there's this whole new aspect of finding out what the next photo is in terms of what the audience, what the public wants to see, what's in the news and what's important to the public. So this is a massive challenge, to be honest. It's a massive shift in how you function as a photographer, because you're kind of expected to be able to produce good results technically and aesthetically.
You have to capture that, like a pure moment, like you said, like the quality does have to be there, but at the same time the photos have to tell you the story of what's going on, right?
Yes, so the substance of the photo becomes like, it basically takes over the aesthetic side of things, basically. And that is a massive challenge to me, because I've never really used to thinking like that.
And do you feel like you have to work like quickly, like for example, if something is happening that you don't, you know, you're not aware of, right? Do you find yourself just getting your camera bag and running down to the station and going to wherever you've heard there might be a news story? Or is it a bit more planned out and you know there's going to be like a march or a protest or whatever it might be, and you can kind of plan to go there, you know, for as long as you need to be there?
Right, speed is definitely very key when it comes to news. So there has been times where I know of something happening that's close to where I am, and I just literally take my bag and just rush over. I think it also depends on what you're after, to be honest, because there are many kinds of news. There can be emergencies, there can be accidents, like the stabbing that just happened yesterday, which was horrible. There could also be things that are more regular, if that makes sense. So it really depends on what you're up to, and it depends on the kind of life that you want to live as a photographer. Not everyone is capable of going to an accident out of the blue, because they might have a family to take care of, they might have other obligations that prevents them from doing it in this way. But there's still room for, you know, a more steady, regular routine if you want to work as a press photographer. And there certainly are people who have some sort of routine. So let's say they're going to be at Westminster every single day at a certain time, or at a certain day of the week, because someone is saying something or a certain meeting is happening, for instance. So there is a huge variety of how you can go about it, really. Ideally, you will be able to do everything, but you don't have to, depending on your personal preference.
Yeah, it's really. And then like in terms of like, you know, the work that you send off to like the press office, if you like, for them to select a photo, I'm guessing you're in competition with other people that were there, other photographers, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
And so do you send as many photos as possible and hope that one gets selected, or are you quite choosy with those photos because you want to send over your kind of like best work and what you're proud of?
Right. I tend to keep it concise. I tend to keep the selection of photos narrow, and I have like a rationale as to whether or not I would send something and whether or not I would not send something, because the people on the receiving end of, you know, the desk or the paper or the media, whatever it is, they are trained professionally to vet whether a photo would serve the needs of their publication.
Yeah.
So they know what they want, and you should know what they want also. And so there really is no point in sending them stuff that they definitely would not want.
Yeah.
And each publication would have a slightly different editorial policy, and also in terms of the kind of visuals that they're looking for. And
Yeah.
so, you know, I having done this for a few, like having done it a few times, I realized that it really is my job to tailor the selection so that they have an easy time going through my photos. And, you know, just send the strongest work. There's no point in sending subpar work that you know they would chuck away anyway. And so it also is a matter of, you know, time efficiency, because as you said, you're in competition with so many other photographers and speed is always key. So rather than waste time editing 10 mediocre photos, why don't you just send 3 and focus on making those 3 good? That would be how I see it.
Yeah, because speed is of the essence. They want to get that out as soon as they can, and
Yeah.
It's really interesting, because I feel like I'd be there. I'd take 200 photos, and the kind of photographer in me, right, that it wants to go home, sit there, upload them on my laptop, tweak them if they need tweaking, and then, you know, narrow it down to 10 that I really like. When you're just like, bam, 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 bam. Okay, here's 3 good ones. Let's send them off. Fingers crossed. Do you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
But it must be weird as well, because, you know, you might have a photo selected, or you might see someone else's work, for argument's sake, and you knew that you were there, and you're like, well, I know my photograph is technically a better photo, right? But the people that are choosing those photos, are they photographers? Probably not. So they're picking based on their unprofessional photography opinion, right? But is it weird to think how it gets selected?
Oh, it's actually something that you can never really know, because at the end of the day, you're not the one who is selecting the photos.
Yeah.
Though I think when it comes to like making a living professionally, the photos really, I think, okay, about 10% of the time, am I really thinking about the photos? But rather, there are a lot of other considerations that go into play.
Yeah.
Say, whether or not, for instance, in the first place, whether or not I turn up to something would already be one of the considerations, and which photos to send and how much to edit and when to send. You know, there are so many things that go on in the back of your head that photos, the quality of the photos itself, is, I mean, it should come as second nature, really.
I really, really like the photos that you've taken with, I think it was HP4.
Yeah,
really like
FP4.
the photos that you pulled, but I didn't know if you had a favorite film or favorite camera.
That's exactly my favorite film. I really like FP4. I really like how punchy it is.
Yeah.
I tend to like more contrast in my photos. I mean, like, hot take, people tend to advise that you should go for a flatter look in your negatives. So I'm fine with having contrast. And I do like to photograph in rather bright conditions. And so the picture that I have in my head is contrasty. And so I don't mind having a more contrasty film, or a film that could fit into that kind of visual. I also like how the grain looks on the FP4 film. So that would be my favorite film. And I tend to like how light works on black and white film. So if I had to pick one film out of all the film stocks in the world, it would be FP4.
I'm so happy you said that, because so many people would pick HP5, or, you know, in terms of black and white, which, you know, is great. But I've recently discovered FP4. Like, I think I've shot it a few times here and there without really knowing, or not really thinking about what I was more interested in just going out and shooting, not reviewing the film stock in my own head. But I recently shot a couple of rolls of FP4, and I remember talking to Luke. I was like, it's my favorite. I love it. Nothing bad with it. In terms of black and white, anyway, I absolutely love it. And I think I even went and bought 4 more. Actually, I think I bought 4 expired rolls recently. Was that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're only like a year expired or something like that. But and I got them a little bit cheaper from our local camera shop. I absolutely love it. I think it's great.
Don't worry, I've shot FP4 from like almost 20 years ago, and it's still good because, you know, with slower films, it doesn't really matter. 1 year expiry is basically nothing. You can shoot it as if it's fresh, so it's really nice.
Was that the film stock you used in a recent video where you pulled it? I think it was like 2 stops and then just a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's
like
it.
100 to like 20 or something like that.
I think I tend to push films more than pulling films, but yeah, I do a lot of pushing on the FP4.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like contrasty photos. Don't get me wrong, I like less contrasty photos. I'd never be bummed out if I took a photo, or I can still appreciate people's work that isn't so contrasty. But personally, if I get a photo back, or I've developed it myself and I can see that I've got high contrast, I'm fine with that. I enjoy it.
As to favorite film camera, I would say, okay, it's probably not a fair comparison because like there's so many different formats and I don't own all of the formats, but I really enjoy shooting on a TLR. I really like the waist level perspective of how it works. So basically, think about it. If you're shooting on a SLR, for instance, you're holding it like this and you're seeing it through the viewfinder. So the camera kind of comes in the way between you and your subject in the case of a portrait. Whereas if you're looking down, there's nothing really in between you and the subject, and they would oftentimes be looking at you, like some general area here. And I really like the vibe of that. And I just like the quality of the square format as well. I think
I was literally saying that, wasn't I? Literally, but me personally, I've been shooting a lot of photos recently, and I haven't got a TLR, but I've been shooting square format and just having my camera, on its strap and taking it from the waist. And I feel like it's just opened my eyes to a whole new realm of photography. But again, I'm really enjoying it at the moment.
Congrats! That's a really good camera to have in the long run. It will, you can do so many amazing things on it.